Good evening. Well, Steve and I kind of swapped out. I was supposed to speak last week, and he was supposed to speak this week, but I was going to be out of town heading up to Iowa. And so he spoke last week, and I'm speaking tonight. He finished up Amos, and we're picking up Habakkuk. Oh, Nahum was it? Okay, I think I missed both sections. Okay, Nahum. I thought we were in Amos. All right. Kind of titled this lesson, "The just shall live by his faith, trusting God in the midst of injustice." Something kind of unique about this book and the 3 chapters is Habakkuk doesn't really preach to anyone. There's a dialogue that's going on between him and God, and God's response to him, to his questions, and his crying out, and then his response to having had this interaction with God in chapter 3. I'm not sure that we're going to get to chapter 3. My plan was to go ahead and just go through all the chapters, but we shall see what that looks like. This is a tough thing right now, this time frame, and there's some differing views of when this happened, but it was likely in the 7th century BC, so in the 600s, and they think that it was probably towards the end, around like 605 or so BC. That's what most people think. It could have been even earlier, but most think that it is in Jehoiakim's reign. So some say it's Manasseh's reign, some say it's the Josiah's reign, but most people think it's Jehoiakim's reign, which is at the end of the 7th century BC. So these are the last years before Judah falls. The Chaldeans, the Babylonians, are going to come in, and they're going to dominate Judah and carry many off captive and rule that area. The Chaldeans or the Babylonians, they're the new and cruel superpower that has come in. They have defeated the Egyptians, which no one expected. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, we see the Egyptians time and time again are always considered a major world power over and over again for history. And they're kind of a lot of times the guys to beat. And so you had the Assyrians, and then you have these Babylonians that are coming in, and the Egyptians guys to beat. They beat the Egyptians, and that kind of lets loose the floodgates. Now there's no one to oppose them. They can go through all of Mesopotamia, they can go anywhere they want and just dominate. And so they're headed to Judah. Babylon rose to power around 626 BC, crushed Egypt in 605 BC, and under King Nebuchadnezzar became the terror of the world. The 10 northern tribes of Israel were already gone. Assyria wiped them out in 722, so about 100 years earlier. And only Judah was left, and now Judah was about to be judged too. Habakkuk preached around the same time as Jeremiah and Zephaniah, and then Daniel and Ezekiel would soon be carried off to Babylon. So we'll have those coming up as well. We'll go over the first 4 verses of chapter 1. The burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see, O Lord, how long shall I cry? And thou wilt not hear, even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save. Why dost thou show me iniquity and cause me to behold grievance? For spoiling and violence are before me, and there are that raise up strife and contention. Therefore the law is slacked, and judgment doth never go forth. For the wicked doth compass about the righteous. Therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. So there's these comments that Habakkuk is making about the people of Judah. This isn't about the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, it's about Judah, his own people. He's looking at them, and he's seeing incredible violence, and he's seeing injustice, he's seeing the immorality, the havoc across all of the culture of his people. Even so much that the law itself, the law of God, which has been handed down, is slack. People don't reverence it, they don't uphold it, and it says, judgment does never go forth the wicked, does compass about the righteous, therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. So this wrong judgment that is proceeding is probably taking the law, twisting it for people's own personal devices, their own personal gain. So taking something that is perfect, David says the law of the Lord, it is perfect, right? It is a lamp to our feet. They are taking this and they're using it for their own purposes, for their own devices, for their own gain, and wrong judgment proceeded. So this is Habakkuk's first complaint about the sin that is within Judah, God's own people. The courts are corrupt and the law no longer protects anyone. This is him crying out, how long? It is the honest cry of a man who feels God is not listening. So he brings this hard question straight to God. God, if you're righteous, if you're holy, he's going to reiterate that. How are you going to let your people reflect you in this way? It's not possible. When are you going to come and bring judgment? That's who you are. Or save them. Moving on to verse 5 through 11. Behold, ye among the heathen in regard and wonder marvelously, for I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told to you. So we get this response that's coming to Habakkuk. Verse 6, for lo, I raise up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, which shall march through the breadth of the land, to possess the dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity shall proceed of themselves. Their horses also are swifter than the leopards, and are more fierce than the evening wolves. And their horsemen shall spread themselves, and their horsemen shall come from far. They shall fly as eagle that hasteth to eat. They shall come all for violence. Their faces shall suck up at the east wind, and they shall gather the captivity of the sand. And they shall scoff at the kings, and the princes shall be a scorn unto them. They shall deride every stronghold, for they shall heap dust and take it. Then shall his mind change, he shall pass over and offend, imputing this his power unto his God. So God is saying he's going to work this wonderful, a wonder marvelously, and that it would be almost impossible to behold, to understand, like, how could this be? This isn't the answer that Habakkuk is looking for. He's looking for salvation, restoration. And then God responds to him and says, actually, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to bring this people group in, and they're worse than Judah. They're heathens, they're pagans, they're idolaters. They're going to come in and exact justice on Judah's sinfulness. I'm going to use them as a tool. So they're going to possess all these dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible, they are dreadful. And then here at the end, we see that he shall pass over, offend, imputing this his power unto his God. So what is his God? Who is he? This is Babylon, it's the Chaldeans. And who is his God? This could be just a reference to his own strength, his own might, his own power. Maybe it's Baal or Marduk. These were some of the Babylonian gods. They might be attributing it to them as being what gave them victory over Judah, over Egypt. Even though God is making it plain that he is actually the one that is allowing for them to sweep through the land and to do this. So he's sending these Babylonians to punish Judah, and God is in control of these pagans and these empires, and he's using them like tools. Then move on to verse 12. Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord my God? So we see that Habakkuk is responding back. He's responding to God again. Art thou not from everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We shall not die, O Lord. Thou hast ordained them for judgment. And, O mighty God, thou hast established them for correction. Thou art of pure eyes and to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. Wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thou thy tongue, and holdest thy tongue when the wicked devoureth the man that is more righteous than he, and makest men as the fishes of the sea, as the creeping things that have no lure over them. They take up all of them with the angle, for they catch them in their net, and gather them in their drag. Therefore they rejoice and are glad. Therefore they sacrifice unto their net, and burn incense unto their drag, because by them their portion is fat, and their meat plenteous. Shall they therefore empty their net, and not spare continually to slay the nations? So it's likening, Habakkuk is crying out to God, he's calling, he's giving God praise, he's acknowledging God, who he is. He's saying that he is the Lord, and he is Habakkuk's God. So Habakkuk is a Jew, he's an Israelite that's in covenant with God. He's his God, his Lord, and he is the one that Habakkuk calls holy, and that he is from everlasting. And then he makes this proclamation that we shall not die, Lord. So he says, Lord, I trust you. I know we'll be okay. We shall not die. Now, that's kind of that's trustworthy. A trustworthy thing to say. Like we know that we shall not die in Christ. We shall not die. We shall have everlasting life. And maybe that's what Habakkuk is saying. Maybe he's thinking in terms of more immediate salvation, rescue from what this judgment that God has just pronounced. Maybe he's just stating that even though this is going to happen, he's confident that those who are trusting God will be preserved. And we know that there was a remnant that was preserved with the people of God. Some of them were carried away. Some of them remained in the land. But those that trusted the Lord did remain. You know, did it happen that people who were in the 10 tribes of Israel or in Judah, whenever this persecution came, that trusted in the Lord, say they were predominantly, they were still faithful to the covenant of God, still trusting in God, that they didn't suffer? I'm sure that they suffered. I'm sure many were killed that trusted in the Lord. With the roving military parties that would come through and slaughter people or carry them off. You know, there was a lot of suffering that was going on. We see that today, where when you have a mixed people group of those who are evil and those who are seeking the Lord, those that seek the Lord don't just escape judgment. They don't just escape the hardship that comes because of the evil that the evil men are doing. But Habakkuk is still saying, even though this evil is coming upon us, I'm trusting you and I have confidence that you will preserve us. Preserve those who are faithful to the Lord. And then in verse 13, he says that God's eyes are pure eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. Wherefore lookest thou upon them that deal treacherously, and holdest thy tongue with the wicked devourer of the man that is more righteous than he. They're saying this wicked nation is coming in, and they're more wicked than Judah is. And you're saying they're going to prevail over Judah. How is that just? How is that possible? And how are you, God, who is just, and whose eyes are pure, and you cannot look upon evil? Why are you the one that's causing this to happen, allowing for this to happen? And I don't think what he's saying is that, God cannot behold evil, he cannot be aware of the evil things that are happening. I think God is more aware of the injustices that are going on in the world than anyone else. I think that's what has to be in order for him to be a perfect, righteous judge. Only a perfect and righteous judge can judge perfectly and righteously if they have all the facts, if they know all the details about the case that's presented to them. And when you have a judge of all the world, well, he has to know all the facts about everything that has happened in all the earth. And so that's God. He knows everything. But it's clear that God does not delight in or condone those things. He's not looking upon them, and when he stands back, he's condoning them just kind of by silence. I think that is what Habakkuk is genuinely asking. How can you stand back? How can you stand back and allow for this to happen if you're a just God? And then he likens the Babylonians unto fishermen. They had the angle, fishing like fishing hooks, and they have their nets. And they pull a drag and they catch these fish, which is the people of the nations, and they pull them and they empty them and they throw the net back out even to catch even more. So they're just scooping them up, and they're very proud and boastful of their ability to do this, to the point that they are sacrificing their net, they're burning incense under their own drag, they're worshiping self, their own ability to conquer the nations and make the other nations desolate. So how can a holy God use a nation even more wicked than Judah? How is this possible? This is Habakkuk's genuine, honest questioning of God, his honest struggle. And what we're going to see through this is God never reprimands him. God never says, how dare you question me? God just gives him answers and tells him this is what's going to happen. And we'll see that his response. Chapter 2, verse 1. I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak, and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Behold, his soul which is lifted up, and is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. So Habakkuk questions God. He lifts up these questions to God. Some call it complaint. The first complaint, which is his first crying out to God, God's response. And now his second complaint, asking, how can you be just and stand by? And then we have God's response again. And Habakkuk's kind of anticipating this response of God and expecting to be reproved. But that reproving is just to be corrected, to be given understanding of what's going to happen. And he is just going to sit and wait upon the tower to see what God will say. And so God is responding. And he gives this line, the just shall live by his faith. But just before that, in verse 4, says, behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him. It's kind of interesting. The soul which is lifted up is not upright. So, well, if you lifted it up, it's not upright. We're just talking about pride. So if Babylon is being proud and they're gaining more and more pride of their ability to destroy the nations, to spew the nations, and they think they're so great, he's saying their soul is not upright, their motives are not upright. This is clear. But the just shall live by faith. So God is promising life to those who are faithful, to those who are just. And if the Chaldeans, the Babylonians, don't meet that criteria, they're not going to have justice. So they're not going to have, their justice is going to come to them. They're not going to have life because they lack faith. And then describes it as they transgress by wine, they are proud. They don't just kind of get to a place where they can ever mind their own business and just be satisfied. They have to constantly seek out hell and death and destruction. And this will ultimately cause their own downfall. This verse 4 about the just shall live by faith is quoted 3 times in the New Testament: Romans 1:17, Galatians 3:11, and Hebrews 10:38. So it's a very famous reference. Starting in verse 6 of chapter 2. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increases that which is not his. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for breeze unto them? Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for violence of the land and the city, and of all that dwell therein. Woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. Thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people, and hast sinned against thy soul. For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. Woe to him that builds a town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity. Behold, it is not of the Lord of hosts that the people shall labor in the very fire, and the people shall weary themselves for very vanity. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea. So God, we saw earlier, he says that Babylon is coming in to bring judgment, but then he turns and pronounces woes upon Babylon, the very nation he is using will itself be judged. And so he points out their greed, robbery, building a city with bloodshed. But in the middle here, we have this promise that one day the whole earth will be full of the knowledge of the glory of God in verse 14, in the middle of the chapter. And that's kind of a very stark, pronouncing these judgments on Babylon, calling out this evil, and kind of painting this picture of Babylon building this house up, and they're using clay, and they're building it high like a nest, so that it's above everyone else, can't be touched. And but the work of all the stone and the wood and what was used to prop that all up was built on the blood of the nations, on war, on death. And that very blood would cry out from the walls of their own building that they had made to secure themselves. The blood would cry out to condemn them. And God says that it is not his intention that people shall labor in the very fire, people shall be weary themselves for very vanity. It's not his intention that any nation should go on warring and accumulating wealth and dominating peoples and enslaving peoples and wearying themselves to the point of becoming weary and thirst for blood, basically, and greed and power, because it's just vanity. The riches, make themselves wings and they fly away. This power that Babylon's trying to secure, eventually it's going to dissipate. It's not going to matter. It's vanity. Would it be possible? Judah is unjust, and Habakkuk that's why he begins calling out to God in the first place. And all of our attention is now shifted to Babylon. We're not really going to really talk about Judah a little bit. All of our attention is shifted to Babylon. Is it possible that if Babylon had, maybe come in and had these victories and kind of established themselves, if their leadership and the people had said, how have we been so successful? And we just dominated. We Egyptians, we took over Israel, and what is this? Maybe somehow if they had been able to acknowledge God fully, and we know that through Daniel and Meshach, and Abednego, that Nebuchadnezzar actually did acknowledge God for a time. But if they had acknowledged God and had sought after God and to honor him, would they have been propped up? Would God have secured them if they did continue on trying to build and pursue after what God was calling vanity? I tend to think so. I tend to think that God just blesses people when they pursue righteousness, that he loves that. Whenever the children of Israel were coming up out of Egypt, there were some places they didn't go at first because there wasn't enough unrighteousness and wickedness. It hadn't fully been riled up in those areas. And so they didn't judge, it wasn't time for those nations to be judged. God was still winking at their ignorance and winking at the things that were not good because the fullness of their wickedness had not come to pass. And only God can judge that. Only God knows what point a nation gets to where it's time for judgment to come. But we haven't seen in the history of the world a nation that has avoided that judgment. There has not been a nation to date that has actually ever avoided judgment of God. Because every nation that has ever existed has turned from the Lord and sought after vanity, and sought after injustice and greed and power and lust. And it falls apart. God brings judgment. That's kind of a sobering thing, but it also illustrates the sovereignty of God, that He is over all nations of the earth. We'll go ahead and finish chapter 2, and I'll stop there. Starting picking back up in verse 15. I want to him that giveth his neighbor drink, that putteth thy bottle to him, and makest them drunken also, that thou mayest look on their nakedness. Thou art filled with shame for glory. Drink thou also, let thy foreskin be uncovered. The cup of the Lord's right hand shall be turned unto thee, and shame spewing shall be on thy glory. For the violence of Lebanon shall cover thee, and the spoiled beasts which made them afraid, because of men's blood, and for violence of the land of the city, and of all that dwell therein. What profiteth the graven image that the maker thereof hath graven it, the molten image, and a teacher of lies, that the maker of his work trusteth therein, to make dumb idols? Woe unto him that saith to the wood, awake, to the dumb stone, arise, it shall teach. Behold, it is laid over with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in the midst of it. For the Lord is in his holy temple, let all the earth keep silence before him. So here in 15, pronounces two more woes against Babylon for shaming others and for idolatry. It starts at 15 and continues on. There's this giving to drink, so that to get a neighbor drunk. I think when I first read this, it's like, woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink. But that sounds like a nice thing. Someone starts speaking of drink, but that's not the purpose. And the purpose is to get them intoxicated and to reveal their shame, reveal their nakedness, and shame them because they're not able to reason. They've been spoiled in their mind through drunkenness. And there are many ways that this can be done. The illustration that's being used here is with drinking, but oftentimes people look for ways to reveal other people's shame and to try to put others down to help elevate themselves. Thou art filled with shame for glory. Thou art filled with shame for glory. What the world sees as glorious, Peter writes about in 1 Peter 4, which I guess we're going to go through pretty soon. I don't think we haven't gone through it yet. It talks about how if you are seeking after Christ, if you're pursuing after Christ, that others will revile you. They'll think you strange. They'll think you weird because you don't go and drink with them. You don't go to the drinking parties and fornication. You don't do what all the world does. And they'll think you're weird, and they might even persecute you for it. But that those who are faithful, those who live by faith, they're blessed in that. They're blessed in that. But it's saying that the glory that Babylon is seeking it's actually a shame. It's actually a shame. And they will be brought to shame. They will be brought to shame. And of course, it's calling out against idols, the idolatry of, I'm sure of Judah, but also of Babylon and all the world. And this is kind of applicable here, but it's applicable at all times. Saying to wood or any inanimate object, Do something for me. Like, rise up. Be my God. Money? Could that be money? Could that be pieces of paper? Could that be a sports team? Could that be, a cool car? Our own beauty, our own athletic ability, our own ability to maybe sing nicely, whatever it may be. These things are gifts that God has given us, just like God gave us wood and stone and things to shelter us and build houses. There's good use for these things, for His glory, for our benefit. There's also very evil use for these things when we lift them up, when we make them the objects of our affection. And of course, it's at the very end, the Lord is holy to all the earth. Keep silence before Him. It's a very beautiful verse. And this is a time when, people are in disarray and they're not really able to worship the way they were commanded to. Being able to actually go and do everything that they're supposed to do as all the times we're supposed to come together. And they're not able to do that anymore. I tend to think that when it says the Lord is in His holy temple, let all the earth keep silence before Him. This is not necessarily the physical temple that they have constructed. The Lord is just reigning. He's just reigning. And all the earth is laid out before Him in His holy temple. And Solomon understood this, and Jesus talks about this, that there's no temple that can be made with hands that can contain the glory and the majesty, the grandeur of God, our great God. And Jesus said that, not in the temple or on this mountain or here or there, or we're going to worship Him specifically, designated. We have to go there to meet God, but we will go worship Him wherever we are at all times in all the earth. I'll leave chapter 3 here. This is Habakkuk's prayer. Just kind of give a little. This is Habakkuk's response to this meeting with God and hearing what God is going to do and the judgments that were going to come to pass and God's sovereignty. And it's really a chapter of praise. And kind of a terrible praise, a terrifying praise of how great God is in the ways that Habakkuk is going to describe Him. So I'll leave that to whoever speaks next in Habakkuk. Thank you.